A shadow has fallen over Roloff Farms, a place that for decades has represented family, struggle, and triumph for millions of viewers. But what if that history was being systematically rewritten from the inside? What if the very foundation of the Roloff legacy was being deliberately dismantled, not by time or neglect, but by a calculated plan to erase a key figure from its story? We have received a series but deeply troubling reports from sources close to the Roloff family, reports that point to a shocking campaign of historical revisionism orchestrated by Caryn Chandler. The goal? To remove Amy Roloff from the farm's history and install herself as the one and only matriarch. This is a story of manipulation, insecurity, and the battle for a family's soul. What we are about to reveal is not just farm drama. It's an alleged attempt to steal a lifetime of memories. This is the kind of exclusive story you will only find here. Before we dive into the shocking details, please take a moment to press that like button. And if you haven't already, subscribe to LPBW Update and ring that notification bell. You are not going to want to miss a single second of the evidence we've uncovered, and your support helps us continue to bring you the stories that others are too afraid to touch. Now, let's begin. Our story starts with a project, one that on the surface seemed innocent, even laudable. Matt Roloff, ever the dreamer and creator, decided it was time to cement the family's legacy for the thousands of tourists who flock to pumpkin season each year. His vision was a new Roloff Legacy Museum to be housed in one of the main barns, accompanied by a complete overhaul of the official Roloff Farms website. According to our sources, Matt saw this as a fun, creative endeavor, a way to celebrate all they had built. He turned to Caryn to spearhead the project, giving her full creative control. In his mind, he was empowering his partner, giving her a meaningful role in the farm's future. He saw it as a gesture of love and trust. He had no idea he was handing her a weapon. For Caryn, this wasn't just a project, it was an opportunity. An opportunity she had apparently been waiting for. Our insiders suggest that for years, Caryn has navigated a difficult position, living and working on a property so deeply intertwined with the identity of another woman. Every corner of that farm, every iconic structure holds a memory of Amy. The family home Amy raised her children in, the kitchen where she developed her recipes, the field she worked alongside her then husband. Caryn, despite being Matt's partner, has always existed in the shadow of that history. This project, we're told, became her chance to step out of that shadow by extinguishing the light of the person who cast it. The first phase of the plan was digital. The Roloff Farms website, the primary point of contact for fans and visitors, was Caryn's initial canvas. She began what can only be described as a systematic digital purge. Iconic photos, images that fans have known and loved for years, began to change. A classic shot of Matt and Amy standing proudly in front of the newly built western town, a testament to their early partnership, was altered. Amy was gone, replaced by a crudely patched-in image of the side of a barn. The photo looked jarring, unbalanced, but Amy was no longer in it. Another beloved photo showed the entire family, Matt, Amy, and the young twins, planting the very first pumpkin patch. On the new website, Amy's side of the image was cropped out, leaving only Matt and the boys. The caption was changed from "The Roloff family starts a tradition" to "Matt Roloff and his sons lay the groundwork for a pumpkin empire." The changes were not subtle, and they were not sophisticated. They were brutal, leaving digital scars in awkward, empty spaces where a person once stood. Our source, who had access to the website's backend, described it as a digital massacre. Photos of Amy with the kids were either deleted entirely or replaced with solo shots of the children, severing the maternal link. The About Us section was completely rewritten. Previously, it spoke of a couple with a dream who, against all odds, turned a fixer-upper farm into a beloved destination. The new version, allegedly penned by Caryn herself, focused almost exclusively on Matt's singular vision and entrepreneurial genius. Amy Roloff, his partner of nearly 30 years, the co-founder of the entire enterprise, was relegated to a footnote, a brief mention that stripped her of any agency or contribution. It was the first step in reducing a life's work to a mere biographical detail. But the website was just the prelude. The real centerpiece of Caryn's alleged campaign was the physical museum in the barn. This was where she could make her revised history tangible, permanent. The barn was transformed. Fresh paint, professional lighting, and large, beautifully printed displays were installed. At the heart of it was a massive timeline, stretching across an entire wall, titled The Roloff Farms Legacy, A Dream Built by Vision. This timeline was the ultimate expression of her revisionist history. Decades of farm life were laid out in chronological order, but the story it told was a warped and selective one. The first entry from the early 1990s read, Matt Roloff purchases a 34-acre farm in Helvetia, Oregon, with a grand vision for the future. There was no mention of Amy being by his side, making that monumental decision and investment with him. Amy's 30-year contribution, a period that encompassed the raising of 4 children on that very land, the co-creation of the pumpkin patch business, the filming of a hit reality show, and countless hours of physical labor, was condensed into a single, dismissive sentence placed under Matt's entry. It read, simply, he was joined by his first wife, Amy, the mother of his 4 children, Jeremy, Zachary, Molly, and Jacob. That was it. She was an accessory, a biological fact, not a partner or a co-creator. Her identity was completely absorbed by her relationship to Matt and her role as a mother. In stark, glaring contrast, the timeline then dedicated an entire glowing section to a new era of professional management. This section detailed Caryn's arrival as a farm manager. Photos, many of which our sources claim were staged or exaggerated, showed Caryn pointing at blueprints, driving a tractor, and laughing with pumpkin season staff. The captions were filled with praise. Caryn Chandler's expert management skills streamlined farm operations, leading to record profits. Another read, Caryn's innovative ideas helped transform pumpkin season into a premier tourist attraction. Her relatively brief tenure as a paid employee was presented as the pivotal moment that saved the farm and propelled it to success, completely overshadowing the 3 decades of foundational work that came before it. The narrative was clear. Matt had the dream, and Caryn made it a professional reality. Amy was just a temporary figure from the amateurish past. The rest of the museum was no better. Displays about the creation of the famous pirate ship or the castle barely mentioned Amy's involvement, focusing on Matt's creative genius. A section dedicated to family life on the farm featured photos of the kids growing up, but with a noticeable and chilling absence of their mother in most of the key shots. Where a family portrait should have been, there was a picture of just the kids. Where a photo of a mother-daughter moment might have been, there was a scenic shot of the farm's landscape. The stage was set for the grand unveiling, but before opening the museum to the public, Matt thought it would be a wonderful idea to give his children a private sneak peek tour. He was, according to our sources, genuinely excited and proud of the work Caryn had done. He saw it as a beautiful tribute to the family's journey. He called Jeremy, Zach, Molly, and Jacob, inviting them for a special family evening to see the new Legacy Museum. The kids, though wary of any new project involving Matt and Caryn, agreed. They were curious, and perhaps a small part of them hoped this could be a healing moment, a project that honored everyone. They couldn't have been more wrong. The 4 siblings arrived at the farm, a place of so many complicated memories, and were greeted by a beaming Matt and Caryn. Caryn led the tour, her voice full of pride as she pointed out the new displays and the glossy timeline. The kids were quiet at first, taking it all in, but the quiet was not one of awe. It was the quiet of profound and growing disbelief. They walked along the timeline, and horror began to dawn on them. Zach was the first to stop, staring at the single sentence that summarized his mother's entire adult life on that farm. He read it, then read it again, his expression hardening. Molly, always the most private and observant, simply shook her head slowly, a look of deep sadness washing over her face. Jacob, ever the cynic in the family, let out a short, bitter laugh. It was a laugh that said, "Oh, of course, this is exactly what I expected." But the breaking point came from Jeremy. He was standing in front of a large framed photograph that was meant to be the centerpiece of the pumpkin season exhibit. It was a famous photo, one that had been used in magazines and on the show for years. It depicted the grand opening of the very first official pumpkin season, a landmark moment for the family. The original photo showed Matt and Amy standing side by side with their 4 young children in front of them, all smiling, cutting a ribbon together. It was the quintessential image of a family united in a shared dream. But the photo on the wall was different. It had been doctored. Amy was gone. She had been completely and skillfully edited out of the picture. The background seamlessly blended to fill the space where she once stood. Now, it was a picture of a proud father, Matt, with his 4 children. Jeremy just pointed at it, his voice low and tight. "Dad, where's Mom?" The question hung in the air, sharp and accusatory. Matt looked at the photo, then back at Jeremy, a flicker of confusion in his eyes. He seemed genuinely taken aback, as if he was seeing it for the first time. Caryn rushed to explain. "Oh, the original was a bit cluttered," she said, her voice a little too bright. "I thought this composition was stronger, really highlighting the kids and their dad starting this wonderful tradition." The room went cold. The flimsy corporate speak excuse was more insulting than the act itself. It wasn't about composition, it was an erasure, a deliberate, calculated act to rewrite their family history, to remove their mother from one of their most cherished memories. The kids looked at each other. The tour was over. The silent shock had now erupted into a palpable, collective fury. They weren't just looking at a bad museum. They were looking at a desecration of their lives, a theft of their own past. The confrontation that followed was immediate and intense, but it wasn't the final one. This initial discovery was just the beginning. The kids left the barn, leaving Matt and Caryn amidst their revised history and huddled together outside. The betrayal was raw. They felt it was a direct attack on their mother, but more than that, it was an attack on them. Their childhood was being curated, edited, and whitewashed by a woman who wasn't there for most of it. It was Zach who took the next step. Fueled by a cold rage, he told his siblings, "I'm going to find the originals. She had to have done this recently. There has to be proof." While the others debated what to do next, Zach marched directly to the farm's main office, a building he knew like the back of his hand. He still had a key from his years of working on the farm. He let himself in, the familiar scent of old paper and wood polish doing nothing to calm his nerves. He went straight to the main desktop computer, the one Caryn used for her administrative work. His heart was pounding. He knew he was crossing a line, but he felt he had no choice. He needed to find the evidence, the smoking gun that would prove this was a deliberate act of malice, not just a series of thoughtless compositional choices. He started clicking through folders, his search methodical and desperate. Farm photos, pumpkin season archives, marketing materials. He found plenty of old photos, but nothing that showed the alterations in progress. His frustration grew. Maybe he was wrong. Maybe Caryn had covered her tracks, and then he saw it. A folder on the desktop, separate from the main archives. It was innocuously labeled website updates. His breath caught in his throat. He double-clicked. The folder opened, and there it was. It was a digital graveyard of their family's history. Inside were dozens of subfolders, each named after a specific photo or event. He clicked on the folder labeled First Pumpkin Season. 2 files appeared on the screen. The first was named Pumpkin Family Original.jpg. He opened it, the photo loaded, and there they were. Matt, Amy, Jeremy, Zach, Molly, and Jacob. The complete happy family. His mother was right there, her arm around a young Jeremy, her face beaming with pride. It was the photo he remembered, the real memory. Then he clicked on the second file. It was named Pumpkin Family 4 Wall Print Final JPG. The images loaded. It was the doctored version from the museum wall. Amy was gone. The space where she stood was now a blur of background foliage. It was chilling to see the before and after side by side. He went back to the main website updates folder and saw another subfolder, Western Town Opening. Inside, Matt Amy Western Original JPG and Matt Western Final Webdate JPG. He opened them. First, the original image of his parents as partners. Then, the horrifying edited version where his mother was replaced by the side of a building. He went from folder to folder, and the pattern repeated. Family Christmas Original.jpg and Kids Christmas/Final.jpg. Amy Kids Baking Original.jpg was in a folder with no final version, just a note in a text file that said, "Do not use, find alternative shot of kitchen." She hadn't just edited the photos, she had cataloged her erasure. But then he saw the final damning piece of evidence. He switched the folder view to details, displaying the file information in columns. He scanned across to the column that read Date Modified. His eyes locked onto the dates. Every single one of the final versions, the Amy-less photos, had been modified within the last month. Many of them were dated just a few days prior. The timestamps proved it. This wasn't some old project or a misunderstanding. This was a recent, rapid, and deliberate campaign to alter the family's historical record, executed by Caryn in the run-up to the museum's launch. This was the smoking gun. Zach took out his phone and began taking pictures of the screen, documenting everything, the folder names, the file names, the date-modified stamps, the side-by-side comparisons of the original and doctored images. He captured every last bit of irrefutable proof. He now held the digital evidence of Caryn's attempt to systematically erase his mother from their family's legacy. He walked out of that office, not with the hot, explosive anger he had felt before, but with a cold, hard certainty. The game had changed. This was no longer just about hurt feelings or a tacky museum. This was a calculated deception, and they had the proof. He met up with his siblings, who were waiting anxiously by their cars. He didn't have to say much. He just showed them the photos on his phone. As they swiped through the images, their expression shifted from anger to grim resolve. The evidence was undeniable. Their next move became crystal clear. They had to confront their father, not with emotional accusations, but with cold, hard facts. They had to present him with the before and after, with the proof of the lie he had been sold. This was no longer just an attack on Amy. They now fully understood it was an attack on the integrity of their entire family, on the very identity of what it meant to be a Roloff. They were going to force their father to look at the truth, to see what Caryn's deep-seated insecurity was doing to the very foundation of the legacy he claimed to cherish so much. The reckoning was coming. The 4 Roloff children, united in purpose, prepared to confront Matt and Caryn, armed with the undeniable truth and ready for the biggest family battle of their lives. The 4 siblings stood in the fading Oregon light, the familiar silhouettes of the farm buildings around them seeming alien and hostile. The air, usually filled with the scent of earth and hay, felt thick with betrayal. The initial shockwave of anger had subsided, replaced by a cold, heavy resolve. They weren't just angry children defending their mother anymore. They were the guardians of a history under siege. Our sources who witnessed the private conference from a distance described it as a somber council of war. Zach, the finder of the proof, was the most visibly agitated. He paced back and forth, the screen of his phone glowing in the twilight as he swiped through the damning evidence again and again, as if trying to burn the images into his mind. He was the one who felt the personal violation most acutely. The erasure of his mother felt like a physical blow. He wanted to storm back into the barn, throw the evidence at their feet, and let the emotional explosion happen. Jeremy, however, counseled a more deliberate approach. He saw this not just as an emotional betrayal, but as a philosophical one. He spoke about the narrative of their lives, the story they had shared with the world, and how this act was a perversion of that truth. To him, Caryn's project wasn't just insulting, it was a form of gaslighting on a grand historical scale. He argued that a raw, emotional outburst would allow their father to dismiss them as being dramatic or oversensitive. They needed to present this with the cold, irrefutable weight of a legal case. Molly, ever the voice of quiet reason, agreed with Jeremy. She was perhaps the most deeply wounded, precisely because she was the least confrontational. The calculated nature of the deception, the sheer premeditation it must have taken for Caryn to sit at a computer and systematically cut her mother out of their family photos, struck Molly as something truly sinister. She insisted they had to do this together, as a united front. If one of them went alone, Matt could divide and conquer, isolate them, and spin the narrative. But all four of them standing together would be a force he could not ignore. And then there was Jacob. He had been the most distant from the farm for years. But this event, this blatant act of historical revisionism, seemed to pull him right back into the center of the family's dysfunction. He saw it as the ultimate symptom of the disease he had long railed against, the transformation of their family into a commercial product. His take was the most cynical and perhaps the most clear-eyed. He saw Caryn not just as an insecure partner, but as a new brand manager trying to relaunch a product by eliminating an inconvenient part of its history. He told his siblings that this was their chance to confront not just Caryn's actions, but the entire mindset that allowed it to happen. They decided on a plan. They would not confront them in the museum, which was Caryn's creation, her territory. They would not do it in the main house, which was now Caryn's home. They would do it in Matt's office, the epicenter of his world, the command center from which he ran his farm and his life. It was a place filled with his blueprints, his models, his awards, his own carefully curated version of the Roloff legacy. It was there, surrounded by his own history, that they would force him to look at the truth of what he was allowing to happen to theirs. They walked to the office in silence, a procession of four people bound by a shared past and a common, painful purpose. They didn't knock. Zach used his key and they entered together. Matt was at his desk, sketching on a notepad, a look of creative satisfaction on his face. Caryn was on the sofa, scrolling through her phone. They both looked up, surprised by the silent, solemn entrance of all four children. Matt's smile faltered, replaced by a look of paternal concern. "Hey, what's going on? You all look like you've seen a ghost." Jeremy stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "Worse, Dad. We saw one being made." The cryptic statement hung in the air. Caryn shifted uncomfortably on the sofa, a flicker of apprehension in her eyes. Zach stepped up beside Jeremy, holding out his phone. He didn't say a word. He just held the screen up for his father to see. On it was the side-by-side comparison. The original photo of the family at the first pumpkin season and the doctored version from the museum wall. Matt squinted, leaning in. "What is this?" he asked, his voice still holding a note of confusion. "That's the picture from the museum," Zach said, his voice dangerously calm. "And this," he swiped the screen, "is the original. Notice anything missing? Or should I say, anyone?" Matt stared at the screen. Our source, who was able to piece together the events from multiple perspectives, said you could see the moment the gears started turning in his head. The denial came first. Well, that's odd. There must be a reason. Maybe the original file was corrupted. Or Caryn stood up, sensing the need to intervene. Oh, that, she said, attempting a casual tone. The resolution on the original was poor on one side. When we blew it up for the print, it looked pixelated. It was a purely technical decision to crop it. It just looked cleaner. The excuse was so flimsy, so transparently false, that it was more insulting than silence. This time it was Molly who spoke, her voice soft but laced with steel. A technical decision? Was it also a technical decision to replace Mom with a picture of a barn wall in the photo from the Western Town opening? Zach swiped again, showing the next before and after. Matt's face tightened. He looked from the phone to Caryn, a question in his eyes. Caryn, what is this? Caryn's composure began to crack. I was just trying to create a cohesive look, a visual theme. The old photos are all over the place. The quality is inconsistent. I was curating the collection to tell a strong, clear story about the farm's journey. Jacob let out a bitter laugh from the back of the room. A strong, clear story, or a false one? It seems the main part of the story you wanted to curate was the one where our mother existed. The final piece of evidence was then presented. Zach navigated to the photo he had taken of the computer screen, showing the website updates folder and the column of date-modified stamps. He held the phone in front of his father's face again. This wasn't a mistake, Dad. This wasn't a technical issue. This was a project. She did all of this in the last month. Here is the proof. She created every single one of these fake photos in the last few weeks. This was planned. The room fell silent. The air crackled with the unspoken truth. Matt stared at the timestamp evidence on the phone, then slowly looked up at Caryn. The confusion was gone from his eyes, replaced by a dawning, horrifying understanding. He was cornered by the facts. His usual tactics of deflection and minimization were useless against the digital evidence his son had uncovered. He had no choice but to see. The emotional dam finally broke. This was the moment the children had prepared for, the moment they moved from presenting evidence to delivering the verdict on what this meant for their family. Zach spoke first, his voice trembling with a mixture of rage and profound hurt. Do you have any idea what this feels like? To walk into a room that's supposed to be about our legacy and see our mother, your wife of 30 years, the woman who built this place with you, reduced to a single sentence? To see her face literally cut out of our memories? She didn't just edit a photo, Dad. She took a knife to our childhood. She is trying to surgically remove our mother from our own lives. And you handed her the scalpel. You gave her the job. You stood there, smiling while she did it. You are letting her steal from us. Not money, not property. You are letting her steal our past. Jeremy stepped forward, his tone less fiery than Zach's, but carrying an even greater weight of disappointment. This has always been your obsession, Dad. Legacy, the Roloff name, the story of the farm. But what is a legacy if it's not built on truth? This thing you've built in that barn isn't a museum. It's a monument to a lie. It's propaganda. Everything you ever taught us about working together as a family, about how we all sacrificed to make this place what it is. That photo of the first pumpkin season that was supposed to be the symbol of all of us together. By letting her erase Mom from that picture, you're telling us that none of it was true, that the partnership was a lie, that her contribution meant nothing. You are personally destroying the very foundation of the legacy you claim to be so proud of. Then came Molly, and her words seemed to cut the deepest. She looked directly at her father, her eyes welling with tears she refused to let fall. We trusted you. We may not always agree, but we believe that at your core, you valued this family's history. How could you not see what she was doing? Or did you see and you just didn't care? When I look at that wall, when I see my own life displayed with my mother intentionally missing from it, it feels like a declaration. It says that my memories are invalid, that the reality I lived is less important than the story Caryn wants to tell. The disrespect is breathtaking. It's a slap in the face, not just to mom, but to each of us. It tells us that we are just characters in the Matt Roloff story, and our experiences can be edited for a better narrative. Finally, Jacob, who had been lingering by the door, delivered the final, devastating analysis. He looked not at Matt, but at Caryn. You know, for a long time, I thought the show was the most toxic thing to happen to this family. But I was wrong. It was just the catalyst. This, he said, gesturing around the office, this is the result. When a family becomes a business, a brand, love and memory are replaced by marketing and optics. And you, Caryn, you are the new marketing director. You saw an inconvenient truth, an original co-founder who complicates the new brand identity, and you initiated a recall. You're trying to launch Roloff Farms 2.0, now with 50% less history and a new, improved matriarch. And you, Dad, he turned his gaze to Matt, his voice dripping with a lifetime of disillusionment. You're the CEO who signed off on it because you thought it would improve the stock price. Every word was a hammer blow against the walls Matt had built around himself. He was speechless. He looked at the faces of his 4 children, united against him, their pain and anger a palpable force in the small office. He saw not petulant children, but adults who had been pushed to their absolute limit. He was forced to see that this wasn't about Amy. Not really. His children weren't there defending their mother's honor in a petty divorce battle. They were there defending their own, their identity, their memories, their truth. They were defending the very concept of their family. And then he looked at Caryn. For the first time, perhaps, he saw her not just as the supportive, loving partner who had revitalized his life, but as his children saw her. An outsider so consumed by her own insecurity, so threatened by the past, that she was willing to burn it all to the ground just to feel secure in the present. He saw the depth of a resentment he had either ignored or failed to recognize. Caryn, now cornered and exposed, finally broke. Her attempts at corporate jargon and casual excuses evaporated, replaced by raw defensive fury. I did it for you, Matt, she cried, tears streaming down her face. I did it all for you. To celebrate you. It's always Matt and Amy, Matt and Amy. For once, I wanted the story to be about you and all that you achieved. They will never accept me. No matter what I do, I will always be the other woman, the farm manager. I've poured my heart and soul into this place, into you, and all they do is look at me with her eyes. I just wanted to carve out a little space for us, for our story. It was a confession, a full confession of her motive laid bare in the wreckage of her plan. It was never about technical issues or curating a story. It was about her own deep-seated insecurity and her desire to possess not just Matt's future, but his past as well. The children stood in stunned silence, her admission even more shocking than their initial discovery. Matt looked utterly broken. The 2 halves of his life, his past with his children and his future with Caryn, had just declared war on each other in his office, and he was standing in the middle of the blast zone. The legacy he wanted to build was a smoking crater. Zach finally broke the silence. He lowered his phone, his voice now devoid of anger, filled only with a weary finality. This has to be fixed, all of it. The museum comes down, the website gets restored to the truth. Every single one of these fakes gets deleted. This is not a negotiation. But you need to understand, Dad, that even if you do all that, something is broken now. This line has been crossed. Our trust in you to protect our family, our history, it's gone. With that, he turned and walked out. Jeremy gave his father one last long look of profound disappointment and followed. Molly, without a word, walked out after him. Jacob lingered for a second at the door, looked at Matt and Caryn, and just shook his head before leaving them alone in the suffocating silence of the office. Matt Roloff stood there, surrounded by the models and blueprints of a fantasy world he had created, forced to confront the reality he had destroyed. He was left alone with the woman he loved and the terrible, undeniable truth of what she had done. The Roloff legacy project was dead, and the Roloff family was more fractured than ever before. The question now hanging in the air, a question our sources say no one has the answer to, is what will Matt do? Will he choose the past, his children, and the truth of his history? Or will he choose his future and the woman who was willing to erase that history to secure her place in it? The battle for Roloff Farms has just begun, and its very soul is on the line. The click of the office door latch was like a gunshot in the suffocating silence. Matt Roloff stood frozen, the angry, pained faces of his children burned into his vision. He was the architect of this disaster, the man who had handed over the keys to his family's history, and he had just watched it all detonate. He slowly sank into his chair, the weight of his children's accusations pressing down on him, a physical force stealing the air from his lungs. He didn't look at Caryn. He couldn't. He stared at his desk, at the half-finished sketch of some new, whimsical project, and it seemed utterly meaningless, a child's drawing in the wreckage of a war zone. Across the room, Caryn finally moved. The sound of her sobbing, which had begun as a desperate defensive tactic, now seemed to crumble into something more genuine, the sound of a person whose gamble had failed spectacularly. "Matt," she whispered, her voice choking, "please, say something." He finally turned his head, and his expression was one she had never seen before. It wasn't anger. It was a terrifying, hollow emptiness. "What is there to say, Caryn?" he asked, his voice flat. "They're right. Everything they said, they're right." This was not the reaction she had anticipated. She had expected him to get angry at the kids for their disrespect, to defend her, to unite with her against the attack. His immediate capitulation sent a new wave of panic through her. "No," she said, standing up, moving towards his desk. "No, they're not. They're hurt, and they're twisting everything. They'll always defend her. You know that. This was never about a few photos, Matt. This is about them never, ever accepting me. This is their way of punishing you for being happy." She was trying to reframe the narrative, to turn the evidence of her deception into a story about the children's intolerance. It was a classic and often effective maneuver. But the evidence had been too stark, the wound she'd inflicted too deep. "Did you really think they wouldn't notice?" Matt asked, his voice gaining a hard edge. "Did you think you could just cut their mother out of their lives and they'd just do what? Thank you for tidying up the family history?" "I was trying to move us forward," she insisted, her voice rising. "I wanted to build something that was about us. Don't you see? Every single day on this farm, I live in her ghost house. I walk on her ghost land. I work in a business she co-founded. The museum was supposed to be the first thing here that was truly ours, a new chapter." "You don't start a new chapter by burning the ones that came before it," he finally roared, slamming his hand on the desk, scattering his pencils. "This isn't a book, Caryn. This is their life, their childhood. You took their most precious memories and you defaced them. For what? To feel a little more secure? To win some imaginary war with a woman who hasn't even lived on this property for years?" He finally stood up, his small stature seeming to fill the room with a towering rage. "You don't get it. The deepest cut of all, the one that I don't know how we recover from, is that you made me the villain. You made me complicit in this. My children, my own children, looked me in the eye tonight and accused me of letting someone steal their identity. And they were right. I was so busy being proud of the new paint and the fancy displays that I didn't even see the truth. You didn't just try to erase Amy. You made a fool of me. Caryn recoiled as if struck. His words confirmed her greatest fear. He was not siding with her. He was siding with them, with the past. At that moment, she saw the chasm that had opened between them. She had tried to solidify her place, and in doing so, she had dynamited her own foundation. Meanwhile, the four siblings had not scattered to their respective homes. They had gathered in the farm's gravel parking lot, their cars clustered together under the cold security light, forming a makeshift council chamber. The fury of the confrontation had drained away, leaving them exhausted and uncertain. Zach leaned against the hood of his truck, staring off towards the dark outline of the main house. "I still can't believe I found it all," he said, more to himself than to anyone else. It was just sitting there. Website updates. Like, she wasn't even trying to hide it, the arrogance of it. Jeremy, ever the analyst, shook his head. It's not arrogance. It's a bubble. They live in their own world up here, Dad and Caryn. They convince themselves that whatever story they tell is the truth. She probably thought it was a brilliant marketing move, streamlining the brand. She never once considered the human cost, because to her, we're not just his kids. We're part of the brand, and Mom is the old, discontinued logo. "Do you think he'll do it?" Molly asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Do you think he'll actually tear it all down?" Her question was the one they were all afraid to ask. They had won the argument, but they had not yet won the war. The power still lay with Matt. Jacob scoffed, kicking at a loose stone. He'll do whatever's best for business. Right now, a family mutiny right before pumpkin season is bad for business. So, yeah, he'll probably take it down. He'll make a big show of it. He'll call a family meeting and talk about healing and misunderstandings. He'll manage the crisis. But don't fool yourselves into thinking this changes anything fundamental. He showed us who he is tonight. He's a man who can be so blinded by a new project that he can't see a betrayal happening right under his nose. "It's more than that, Jake," Zach countered, his voice low. "I saw his face when I showed him the files. He wasn't acting. He was broken. He believed her. He was proud of this garbage. The problem isn't just that he's a businessman. The problem is that he's a terrible judge of character." A heavy silence fell over the group as the weight of that statement settled. They had confronted the symptom, but the disease remained. Their father's choices, his fundamental blind spots, had led them to this point. The conversation then shifted to the inevitable next step. "Someone has to tell Mom," Molly said softly. "She has a right to know." All eyes turned to Zach. He had been the one to find the proof, the one to lead the charge. He sighed, pulling his phone from his pocket. "I'll do it," he said. "It's better she hears it from one of us than finds out some other way." He walked a short distance away from the others, seeking a sliver of privacy in the vast darkness of the farm. He scrolled to his mother's contact, his thumb hovering over the call button. How do you tell someone that their life's work, their very existence in the narrative of their family, has been the target of a systematic erasure campaign? He pressed the button. Amy Roloff was in her kitchen, cleaning up after a quiet dinner. The house was peaceful, a stark contrast to the years of chaos and filming. The phone buzzed on the counter, and she smiled when she saw Zach's name. "Hey, honey, what's up?" she answered, her voice warm. Zach's voice on the other end was strained, tight. "Hey, Mom, you sitting down?" A knot of maternal dread instantly formed in her stomach. "Zachary, what is it? Is everyone okay? Are the kids all right?" Yeah, everyone's fine. Physically," he clarified. And the word hung there, heavy with implication. "We're all over at the farm. Dad and Caryn built this new museum thing in one of the barns for pumpkin season." Amy was confused. "A museum? Okay. It's supposed to be about the farm's history, the Roloff legacy," Zach continued, the words tasting like poison in his mouth. "And we went to see it tonight, and Mom, it's bad. It's really bad." He then began to explain, his voice a torrent of controlled fury, detailing the timeline, the single sentence that summarized her 30 years, the doctored photos, the replacement of her image with landscapes and barn walls. He told her everything, culminating in the discovery of the files on the computer, the digital proof of the deliberate recent alterations. Amy sank onto a kitchen stool, the phone pressed hard against her ear. She said nothing. She just listened, her knuckles white as she gripped the edge of the counter. As Zach spoke, a strange and terrible feeling washed over her. It wasn't just anger or sadness, it was a profound and chilling sense of dislocation, as if she were becoming a ghost in her own life. She thought of the years of backbreaking work, the pain of childbirth, the sleepless nights with sick children, the fights with Matt over money, the joy of a successful pumpkin season, the stress of filming, the decision to buy the farm in the first place. All of it, her entire lived reality, had been curated, judged, and found wanting. It had been deemed an inconvenience to a cleaner story. She felt like a character crossed out of a novel by a new author. When Zach finished, the silence on the line was profound. "Mom, are you there?" "I'm here," she finally said, her voice a hollow echo of itself. "I always knew she was insecure. I knew she resented my history with your father. But I never imagined this. This is monstrous." There was a pause, and then her voice returned, imbued with a cold, hard clarity. "You have the pictures, Zach? The before and after?" "Yeah, I have them all." "Good," Amy said, her voice devoid of tears, filled now with a steely resolve that Zach knew well. "That's good. Your father let this happen. This is on him. Thank you for telling me, Zachary. Thank you and your brother and sisters for standing up for the truth, for standing up for me." After they hung up, Amy stood motionless in her quiet kitchen for a long time. The initial shock gave way to a wave of validation so intense it was nauseating. For years, she had felt undermined, marginalized, slowly pushed out of the world she had helped build. She had been made to feel like she was the problem, that her unwillingness to let go was the source of all the tension. Now she had proof. It wasn't in her head. It was a calculated campaign. A thief had broken into her past, not to steal jewels or money, but to steal her very presence. To pick the locks on her memories and empty them of her existence. She had been erased like a chalk drawing in the rain. Back at the farm, long after his children had departed, and Caryn had retreated to the main house in a storm of tears and recriminations, Matt Roloff walked out of his office and into the cold night air. He didn't go towards the house. Instead, he walked towards the museum barn, a solitary figure moving through the darkness. He needed to see it again, but this time through his children's eyes. He unlocked the door and stepped inside, the familiar smell of old wood and new paint greeting him. He didn't turn on the main lights, using only the flashlight from his phone, the narrow beam cutting through the darkness like an interrogator's lamp. He swept the light across the displays, the glossy photos, the professionally lettered text. Under the harsh, focused beam of the flashlight, the museum no longer looked like a proud legacy. It looked cheap. It looked like a lie. The light fell on the great timeline on the wall. He walked towards it, his footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. He read the entry about his own grand vision. Then, his light found a single sentence dedicated to his former wife. He was joined by his first wife, Amy, the mother of his 4 children. He read it over and over, joined by, not together with his wife, Amy. She was an afterthought, an accessory. He felt a profound sense of shame. He moved the beam to the large frame photo from the first pumpkin season. In the darkness, the doctored image was even more jarring. The space where Amy should have been felt like a black hole, a void that pulled all the joy and authenticity out of the image. It was a picture of a lie, a happy family with a gaping wound. He reached out and touched the glass over the photo. He saw his own reflection, a tired old man illuminated in the phone's glow, standing in a monument to his own spectacular failure. He had been so obsessed with cementing his legacy that he had allowed its very soul to be carved out and thrown away. Jacob's words echoed in his head, Roloff Farms 2.0, now with 50 less history. That's what this was. And he had endorsed it. He had applauded it. He let the flashlight beam drop to the floor, plunging the barn back into near total darkness. Standing there alone, amidst the ghosts of his own making, Matt Roloff finally understood the full scope of the damage. And he knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that taking down the pictures would be the easy part. The real work, the impossible work, would be trying to rebuild the foundation of trust he had just allowed to be bulldozed into the ground. He turned, walked out of the barn, and locked the door on the lie he had almost let become his legacy. The reckoning was over. The reconstruction was about to begin. The first light of dawn cast long skeletal shadows across Roloff Farms as Matt approached the museum barn. He wasn't just tired, he was hollowed out, aged by a single night of catastrophic revelation. He carried a drill and a crowbar, tools of creation he would now use for demolition. He unlocked the door and stepped inside, the air still and cold. A few moments later, Caryn appeared at the doorway, her face pale and swollen from crying. She was wearing work clothes, a clear sign Matt had summoned her. "You can't be serious," she said, her voice a raw whisper. "You're actually going to tear it all down? All that work? All that money?" Matt didn't look at her. He walked over to the centerpiece, the doctored photo of him and the children, and began unscrewing it from the wall. "The work was a lie, and the money was spent on a deception," he said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. "So, yes, it's all coming down today, and you're going to help me." The demand was a punishment, and they both knew it. It wasn't about the need for an extra pair of hands. It was about forcing her to participate in the undoing of her own crime. It was a penance. Caryn watched him for a moment, a storm of defiance and humiliation in her eyes. "This is cruel, Matt. You're humiliating me." "Humiliating you?" he shot back, finally turning to face her, his eyes blazing. "You tried to systematically erase the mother of my children from our family's history. You lied to me. You lied to them. You made me look like the world's biggest fool and the world's worst father. And you want to talk about humiliation? Grab a crowbar, Caryn. We're starting with the timeline." The hours that followed were a symphony of destruction, performed in near silence. The screech of screws being pulled from drywall, the splintering crack of plywood displays being pried from their moorings, the heavy thud of framed lies being stacked in a pile in the center of the barn. Every sound was an accusation. They worked on opposite ends of the barn, the space between them a no man's land of resentment. Caryn worked with a furious, resentful energy, tearing down the glowing section about her own contributions with a particular vengeance, as if destroying the evidence could somehow erase her culpability. Matt worked with a grim, methodical pace, dismantling the narrative he had so proudly presented to his children just the night before. With each panel he removed, he saw the ghostly outlines left on the freshly painted walls, faint rectangles of where the lies used to be. The barn, once a symbol of a bright, curated future, was quickly becoming a ruin, a testament to a project that had failed in the most spectacular way possible. Across the valley, in her quiet, orderly home, Amy Roloff was also awake. She had not slept. She had spent the night wrestling with a profound sense of violation. But as the sun rose, that feeling began to crystallize into something else: strength. She was not a victim. She was the truth, and the truth had just been given an arsenal of evidence. She sat at her dining room table with a cup of coffee and her laptop. Open on the screen was a blank email. She was composing a message, not to Matt, not to her children, but to a trusted contact, a journalist who had covered the family for years with a fair and balanced hand. She had always been cautious, always playing by the rules of the show and the family's unwritten code of public silence. But that code had been broken. The war was no longer a private one. A deliberate attempt had been made to publicly erase her. A public response was not only justified, it was necessary. She began to type, choosing her words with surgical precision. She wouldn't be emotional, she would be factual. She would frame it not as a personal attack, but as a matter of historical record. She would speak of the importance of truth and legacy, honoring the contributions of everyone who built the farm, not just the convenient parts of the story. She wouldn't send Zach's photos, that was his evidence to hold, but she would describe them. She would describe the timeline. She would describe the single sentence. She was building a narrative shield, getting her story out there before Matt and Caryn could concoct a sanitized, corporate-approved version of what had happened. This was not an act of revenge. It was an act of historical preservation. She was reclaiming her own story before it could be permanently rewritten. She read the email over one last time, her finger hovering over the send button. This would change everything. It would take their private war and turn it into a public spectacle. It would force accountability in a way her children's confrontation, however powerful, never could. She took a deep breath and clicked send. Back at the farm, the demolition was nearly complete. The barn was a hollowed-out shell, the walls scarred, the floor littered with debris. The pile of dismantled displays in the center of the room looked like a funeral pyre for a false idol. Matt, covered in a fine layer of dust, surveyed the scene. This was the first step, the easy step. Now came the hard part. He knew he had to face his children, and he decided to start with the one who had been the catalyst for this whole ugly revelation, Zach. He drove to Zach and Tori's house, the short journey feeling like a drive towards his own execution. He rehearsed apologies in his head, but they all sounded hollow and self-serving. He knocked on the door, and Tori answered, her expression polite but guarded. The warmth she usually greeted him with was gone, replaced by a cool formality. Matt, Zach's in the living room. The atmosphere in the house was thick with tension. Zach was sitting on the couch, watching him with an unreadable expression. The children were nowhere to be seen, a clear sign that this was not a casual grandparent visit. Matt stood awkwardly in the middle of the room. The museum is gone, he said, the words falling flat. I took it all down this morning. Caryn and I took it all down. Zach just nodded, offering no praise, no absolution. Okay. The single word was a clear message. It was the bare minimum. It was not enough. Look, Zach, Matt began, stepping further into the room, wringing his hands. I am so sorry. I never should have let it happen. I was just so excited about the project, the craftsmanship. I guess I didn't look closely enough. I didn't see what was really happening. Zach's expression hardened. It was exactly the kind of excuse he had expected. The apology wrapped in self-justification. You didn't look closely enough? Zach repeated, his voice dangerously low. Dad, it was a 50-foot timeline on the wall. The main picture had my mother literally cut out of it. This wasn't a detail in the fine print. It was the entire story. You didn't want to see it. You saw what Caryn wanted you to see. Tori, who had been standing by the kitchen doorway, stepped forward. With all due respect, Matt, she said, her voice firm but respectful, this isn't just about a mistake. This was a statement. Caryn made a statement about who she thinks belongs in this family's history, and you co-signed it. You stood there and smiled. Do you understand how deeply that hurts? She tried to tell our kids that their grandmother, Amy, was just a footnote. That's not something a simple sorry can fix. Matt deflated. the prepared speeches dying on his lips. I know, I just don't know what to do. I'm trying to fix it. Fixing it isn't just about tearing down a wall, Zach said, finally standing up. Fixing it is about understanding why you let it happen in the first place. Fixing it is about you realizing that your loyalty is so divided that you can't even be trusted to protect your own family's history. We can't trust you. I can't look at you and Caryn and not see this, not see what she did and what you allowed. I don't want that around my kids. So, yeah, thanks for tearing it down. But we need space, Dad. A lot of space. The finality in Zach's voice was absolute. This was not a negotiation. It was a banishment. A devastated Matt could only nod. He had come seeking a path to forgiveness, and instead, he had been handed a restraining order on his family's heart. He left their house feeling more alone than ever, the chasm between him and his children wider than he had ever imagined. He got back in his car, the silence deafening. He didn't know where to go next. Jeremy, Molly, he felt he was just making things worse. As he sat there, engine off, in the driveway of the son who had just exiled him, his phone buzzed. It was a notification, a news alert from a popular reality TV blog. He tapped on it, his blood running cold as he read the headline. Insider report, Roloff legacy in turmoil as new museum allegedly erases Amy Roloff from farm history. He frantically scrolled through the article. It was all there. Anonymous sources, described as close to the family, had detailed the entire project, the timeline, the single sentence, the doctored photos, the secret late-night confrontation with the children. The writer speculated on the deep rift it had caused, questioning the future of the family and the farm itself. The story was out. Their intensely private, deeply painful family wound had been ripped open for the entire world to see. It was a public relations nightmare of epic proportions, and it had broken just as pumpkin season was about to begin. Matt's hands trembled as he held the phone. His attempt to manage the crisis privately had just been blown to pieces. He was no longer just dealing with his children's anger. He was now facing a public jury. His mind raced. Who would do this? Who would leak it? A disgruntled employee? One of the kids? Jacob? And then a sickening thought occurred to him. Who had the most to gain by controlling the narrative? By getting their side of the story out first? He thought of Amy, of her quiet strength that so often concealed a will of iron. This was a masterstroke of strategy. It was a checkmate. He was trapped. The barn was empty, but the ghosts were now out, and they were talking to the press. The reconstruction wasn't just beginning. It was about to become a public war. The phone felt like a hot coal in Matt Roloff's hand. He stared at the headline, the words swimming before his eyes. This wasn't a leak. This was a targeted precision strike. The level of detail, the specific quotes, it all pointed to an inside job. He threw the car into gear, tires spitting gravel as he sped back towards the main house, his mind a maelstrom of fury and paranoia. He burst through the door to find Caryn in the kitchen, wiping down a counter with a ferocity that betrayed her inner turmoil. She did it, Matt said, his voice a low growl. He held up the phone, shoving the screen in her direction. She couldn't just win. She had to scorch the earth. She leaked it all to the press. Caryn's eyes scanned the article, her expression shifting from despair to a kind of grim validation. This, finally, was a battlefield where she felt she had a footing. Her own actions might have been indefensible, but a public smear campaign? That was something she could fight. Of course she did, Caryn said, her voice dripping with a newfound righteousness. I told you, Matt. I told you she would never stop. This was never about a museum. This is about her trying to destroy you, to destroy us. She wants to burn this farm to the ground just so I can't be happy here. This is proof. She's not a victim. She's a manipulator. It was the perfect pivot. In an instant, Caryn's act of historical revisionism was reframed as the provocation, and Amy's alleged leak was the unconscionable escalation. Matt, reeling from the public exposure and his son's rejection, was desperate for an enemy he could fight, a target for his rage that wasn't his own children. Caryn was offering him one on a silver platter. "She's trying to ruin pumpkin season," Matt said, the realization dawning on him. "This is a calculated business attack. She knows this is our busiest time, our biggest income. This is meant to hurt us where it counts." His shame from the night before was being rapidly consumed by the flames of a new, more palatable anger. He was no longer the foolish father who'd been duped. He was the patriarch defending his empire from a malicious outside attack. He and Caryn were no longer co-conspirators in a lie. They were partners under siege. The alliance, which had been shattered just hours before, was now being reforged in the fires of a common enemy. The news broke across the siblings' phones like a digital tsunami. Jeremy saw it first and immediately started a group call. "Okay," he said, dispensing with greetings. "Everybody see it." A chorus of weary yeses came through the speakers. "So, the million-dollar question," Jeremy continued. "Who did it?" The digital air crackled with suspicion. "It wasn't me," Zach said immediately, his voice sharp. "I wanted to handle this privately. The last thing I want is a bunch of strangers on the internet picking apart our family. This makes everything 10 times worse." "I feel like I'm going to be sick," Molly added, her voice faint. "I can't even imagine talking to a reporter about this." "Don't look at me," Jacob's voice crackled, laced with his signature ironic detachment. "While I applaud the chaos, it's not my style. I prefer a well-written manifesto, not some anonymous quote in a gossip blog." The unspoken question hung between them all. "Do we think Mom did it?" Jeremy finally asked. There was a long pause. "She had every right to," Zach said, his loyalty and his frustration at war with each other. "After what they did, I can't even blame her if she did. But, damn it, this complicates everything. Now Dad's going to play the victim. He's going to use this leak to justify everything, to make himself and Caryn look like the ones being attacked." Zach was right. They had presented Matt with a moral crisis, and in response, their mother had handed him a PR crisis. And Matt Roloff had spent a lifetime proving he was far more comfortable navigating a PR crisis than a moral one. This public battle would allow him to dodge the private reckoning they had tried to force upon him. Their united front was still solid, but now they were fighting a war on two fronts: their father's betrayal and a public narrative that was spiraling out of their control. Fueled by a fresh sense of betrayal and Caryn's encouragement, Matt scrolled through his contacts and found Amy's number. He was done feeling ashamed. He was ready for a fight. Amy answered on the second ring, her hello calm and measured. "Did you do it?" Matt snarled. No preamble, no greeting. "I have no idea what you're talking about, Matthew," she replied, her voice infuriatingly placid. "Oh, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The article, the leak. You couldn't just have your little victory with the kids, could you? You had to run to the press and try to ruin us right before pumpkin season." "It sounds like you're having a stressful day," Amy said, her tone as calm as a frozen lake. "And it sounds like you're more upset about an article than you are about the fact that your partner tried to erase me from our children's lives." Her ability to turn his anger back on him was maddening. "This is low, Amy, even for you. This is a vindictive, hateful thing to do to your own family." "My family?" Amy's voice finally lost its calm, replaced by a sharp, cold edge. "You and I stopped being a family a long time ago. And my family, my children, I'm very proud of them for standing up for the truth." "What you are angry about, Matthew, is that you've lost control of the story. You thought you could build a museum of lies, and no one would notice. But the truth has a way of getting out. Whether it's in a private confrontation or in a news article, the truth is the truth. Perhaps you should focus less on who told the story and more on why the story was so ugly in the first place. Matt was sputtering, speechless. She hadn't admitted it, but she hadn't denied it. She had claimed the moral high ground with such authority that he was left clinging to a cliff of his own making. "You will not destroy this business," he seethed. "I'll do everything in my power." "You should have thought of that," Amy cut him off, "before you decided your legacy was worth more than your history." And with that, she hung up. Matt stared at his phone, his face red with impotent rage. He had been outmaneuvered at every turn. He had lost the confrontation with his children, and he had just spectacularly lost the confrontation with his ex-wife. The first tangible consequence of the leak came within the hour. The Roloff Farms official Facebook page, usually a cheerful stream of pumpkin photos and event announcements, became a digital war zone. The comments section of the most recent post was a raging fire of fan opinions. "Team Amy forever. How dare you erase that amazing woman?" One comment read, with over 2,000 likes. "Matt and Caryn are despicable. Boycotting Roloff Farms this year." Another wrote, "This is Caryn's insecurity on full display. A truly pathetic move." There was a smaller contingent defending him. "This is their farm now. They can tell their own story. And Amy needs to move on, stop living in the past," but they were overwhelmingly outnumbered. The court of public opinion was in session, and the verdict was coming in swift and brutal. Matt and Caryn watched the comments pour in, each one a fresh sting. This wasn't an abstract PR problem anymore. This was a revolt. His customers, his fan base, the very people whose adoration he had cultivated for 2 decades were turning on him. "We have to say something," Matt said, pacing the office. "We need to release a statement. We need to get ahead of this." He grabbed a legal pad and a pen. "Okay, let's draft something." "We need to be strong," Caryn insisted, looking over his shoulder. "We need to say that we're the victims of a coordinated smear campaign." Matt Storation writing, "We are deeply saddened by the recent misleading reports." Caryn shook her head. "No, misleading is too weak. Say false reports." "They're not false, Caryn," Matt shot back, his frustration boiling over. "The timeline was real. The photos were real. We can't lie about that." "Then we call them out of context," she countered. "We say the museum was a work in progress and that these elements were taken out of context to create a malicious narrative." "And who's going to believe that?" Matt groaned, scribbling out the line. "It sounds like a pathetic excuse." He tried a new approach. "We have always cherished the history of this farm and the contributions of everyone involved." "That makes it sound like Amy was right," Caryn said, her voice rising. "You're apologizing. We have nothing to apologize for. She's the one who leaked it." "I have everything to apologize for," Matt yelled, throwing the pen down on the desk. "I let this happen. My kids hate me and Nastasia, and now my business is probably going down the drain, and you want me to write a post about how we're the victims?" They were at a complete impasse. He knew, on some level, that the only way forward was through humility and a full-throated apology. She, on the other hand, believed that any apology was an admission of guilt that would only empower their enemies. They couldn't agree on a strategy because they couldn't even agree on who the villain was. The statement remained unwritten, a blank testament to their paralysis. The social media fire raged on, unchecked. The story of the farm's legacy was now being written by thousands of angry strangers, and the owners of the farm could do nothing but watch it all burn.